What if everything you know about ancient history is wrong? Not slightly inaccurate, not missing a few details, but fundamentally mistaken. You were taught that progress moves forward, that ancient people were primitive, that modern science, the pinnacle of human understanding, but the evidence suggests otherwise. 2,000 years ago, engineers carved cities into cliffs. They built water systems that still function. They aligned temples with solstices and lunar cycles. They understood gravity, pressure, and resonance without textbooks, without machines. Roman concrete strengthens over time. Its formula used volcanic ash and seawater to create a chemical bond that heals itself. Modern engineers still study it, trying to replicate its resilience. They didn't build for decades. They built for centuries. Civilizations tracked the stars with precision. They predicted eclipses. They mapped planetary motion. They encoded mathematics into architecture. The Babylonians, Mayans, Egyptians observed the cosmos with a clarity that still puzzles astronomers. Astronomy did not begin with telescopes. The sky was measured long before glass was shaped. In Peru, skulls show evidence of brain surgery. In India, surgical texts described hundreds of procedures was used to detect internal imbalances. In Egypt, medical papyri catalogued herbs and treatments. These were not guesses. They were systems. They were knowledge passed through generations. Much of this knowledge was lost. Libraries were burned. Languages were erased. Artifacts were stolen or destroyed. Colonial powers dismissed indigenous science. Religious authorities labeled ancient knowledge as heresy. Historians focused on conquest, not competence. Today, technology is helping us see what was hidden. LiDAR scans reveal thousands of structures beneath the trees of Guatemala. Satellite imaging traces ancient river systems in India. AI helps decode forgotten scripts. This is not discovery. This is remembrance. Before moving on deep into it, let us know in comments from which part of the world you are listening, and subscribe this channel. You are not listening to kings or warriors. You are listening to engineers, astronomers, healers, and builders, to people who shaped the world in ways you were never taught. They didn't seek fame. They sought function. They didn't write manifestos. They carved stone. They didn't conquer. They constructed. If they were smarter than us, why did we forget them? And if we're only now remembering, what else have we missed? You are walking through a city carved into stone. There are no machines, no steel, no glass, but everything works. Water flows. Terraces hold. Foundations endure. This is Machu Picchu, built by the Inca in the 15th century. It sits nearly 8,000 feet above sea level, and yet its water systems are more reliable than many in modern cities. Channels carved into granite guide rainfall away from fragile slopes. Fountains operate on pressure differentials. Drainage systems prevent erosion in one of the wettest climates on Earth. You were taught that the Inca were warriors, but they were also engineers. Their cities were designed to survive. What kind of knowledge does it take to build something that lasts this long? In the heart of the Roman Empire, concrete was more than a building material. It was a science. Roman concrete used volcanic ash, lime, and seawater. The mixture triggered a chemical reaction that strengthened over time. It was poured into wooden molds, shaped into harbors, aqueducts, and temples. Some of these structures still stand today. Modern concrete cracks and crumbles. Roman concrete heals itself. You walk past these ruins, admiring their age, but age is not the miracle. Longevity is. Why did they build for centuries, while we build for decades? In the Indus Valley, long before Rome or Greece, cities were planned with precision. Mohenjo-daro had grid-based streets, covered drainage systems, public baths, standardized bricks, used across hundreds of miles. There were no palaces, no monuments to power, no written records of kings, but there was order, there was hygiene, there was quiet brilliance. You were taught that civilization began with conquest, but here it began with infrastructure. What kind of society chooses sanitation over spectacle? In the highlands of Peru, the fortress of Sacsayhuaman defies explanation. Its walls are made of massive stones. Some weigh over 100 tons. They are fitted so tightly, not even a blade of grass fits between them. There is no mortar, no visible tool marks, no written record of how they were moved or shaped. The stones curve around corners. They absorb seismic shock. They have stood through centuries of earthquakes. You were taught that ancient builders used trial and error, but this is not error. This is mastery. What kind of tools leave no trace? In Baalbek, Lebanon, lies the largest stone block ever quarried. It weighs over 1,000 tons. It was cut, moved, and placed with precision. No modern crane can lift it. No blueprint explains its purpose. It sits beneath a Roman temple, but its origins are older. Its function is unknown. You were taught that bigger means better, but here, bigger means forgotten. Why build something no one can move? In Cambodia, the city of Angkor was not just a temple complex. It was a hydraulic civilization. The Khmer Empire built reservoirs, canals, and flood control systems. They managed water across seasons. They sustained agriculture in monsoon climates. They built roads, bridges, and urban centers. When the empire fell, the jungle reclaimed it. For centuries, Europeans called it lost, but it was never lost to those who remembered. You were taught that empires fall because of war, but sometimes they fall because of silence. What happens when memory is overwritten across these civilizations? The pattern repeats: precision without machines, durability without steel, design without ego. You were taught to admire monuments, but the true genius lies in what you don't see, in the systems beneath the surface, in the choices made for survival, not spectacle. These engineers were not anonymous. They had names, they had apprentices, they had methods, but history erased them. Why do we remember kings, but forget the builders? You are standing in a museum, looking at a clay jar. It is small, unassuming, and cracked with age. But inside, there is copper, there is iron, there is acid residue. This is the Baghdad Battery. It was found in Iraq, near the ruins of ancient Parthian settlements. It dates back over 2,000 years, and it may have produced electricity. The jar contains a copper cylinder, an iron rod, and traces of vinegar or wine. When combined, these elements can generate a small electric charge, enough to electroplate metals, enough to power a simple device. You were taught that electricity began with Benjamin Franklin, but this jar suggests otherwise. Why would ancient people build something they didn't understand? In Egypt, On the walls of the Temple of Hathor at Dendera, there is a carving. It shows a bulb-shaped object. Inside, a serpent coils upward. Beside it, figures hold rods and stand beneath lotus-shaped terminals. Some believe this is a symbolic image. Others believe it depicts a form of electrical lighting. The Dendera light theory suggests that ancient Egyptians may have used electrostatic or arc-based illumination. There are no soot marks in deep tombs, no evidence of torches or oil lamps in certain chambers, but the walls are carved with precision. You were taught that ancient builders worked in darkness, but the carvings suggest light. What kind of light? Leaves no trace. In India, the Agastya Samhita is a Sanskrit text. It describes a method for producing energy using copper, zinc, and chemicals. It outlines a process that resembles electrochemical reactions. It speaks of Mitrovarana, two poles placed in a jar of liquid. It mentions prana, a force that flows between them. The text is thousands of years old. It was written long before batteries were invented, and yet its language mirrors electrical principles. You were taught that ancient texts are metaphorical, but this one reads like a manual. Why would a poet describe a circuit? In the Americas, the Olmec civilization carved magnetized stones. They aligned them with cardinal directions. They used lodestones to orient structures. Some believe they understood geomagnetic fields. In China, early compasses used magnetized needles floating in water. They were used for divination, then navigation. They appeared centuries before the West adopted magnetic tools. In Greece, Thales of Miletus described static electricity. He observed that rubbing amber attracted feathers. He called it electricus, from the word for amber. These were not isolated observations. They were patterns. They were experiments. You were taught that science requires formal labs. But ancient people used the world as their laboratory. What kind of knowledge survives without institutions? In Mesopotamia, ziggurats were built with layers of conductive materials, bitumen. Some researchers believe these structures could have harnessed atmospheric electricity. Others suggest they were symbolic representations of cosmic energy. In Peru, the Nazca lines stretch across the desert. They are massive geoglyphs over 1,000 feet long. They align with solstices, water sources, and magnetic anomalies. Their purpose is unknown. In Cambodia, Angkor Wat is aligned with celestial events. Its towers mirror the constellation Draco. Its reservoirs reflect solar cycles. These alignments are not accidental. They are deliberate. They are mathematical. You were taught that ancient architecture was decorative, but these structures behave like instruments. What kind of civilization builds with the sky in mind? In the ruins of Tiahuanaco, Bolivia, there are stone blocks with drill-like holes. They are precise, symmetrical, and uniform. Some believe they were shaped using advanced tools. Others suggest sonic or vibrational techniques. In Malta, the hypogeum contains chambers with acoustic properties. A voice spoken in one chamber resonates throughout the structure. The frequency matches the human brain's alpha waves. It induces calm, focus, and altered states. In Egypt, the Great Pyramid contains shafts aligned with stars. Its chambers resonate at specific frequencies. Its dimensions encode mathematical constants. These are not coincidences. They are calculations. You were taught that ancient builders worked by instinct, but these designs suggest intention. What kind of knowledge is measured in resonance? In ancient texts, energy is described in many forms. In China, qi flows through meridians. In India, prana moves through chakras. In Greece, pneuma animates the body. In Egypt, ka sustains the soul. These concepts are not identical, but they share a theme. They describe invisible forces. They describe flow, balance, and polarity. Modern science speaks of electricity, magnetism, and electromagnetism. It uses equations. It uses instruments. But the language of energy is older than the voltmeter. You were taught that ancient beliefs are superstition, but they may be early models of physical phenomena. What kind of truth hides in metaphor? In Ethiopia, the Ark of the Covenant is said to reside in a church. It is guarded, hidden, and never shown. Some believe it is a myth. Others believe it is a relic of unknown power. In biblical texts, the ark emits light. It causes illness. It is carried with caution. It is described as dangerous. Some researchers suggest it was a capacitor, a device that stores and releases energy. Its design includes gold, wood, and insulation. You were taught that sacred objects are symbolic, but some behave like machines. What kind of artifact requires insulation? In the ruins of ancient India, iron pillars stand without rust. The Delhi iron pillar is over 1,600 years old. It resists corrosion due to its composition and environmental factors, but its preservation is still studied. In Japan, ancient bronze mirrors reflect light in unusual ways. Their backs are carved with patterns that appear on the reflected surface. The technique is called magic mirror. It requires precise metallurgy. In Greece, Archimedes used mirrors to focus sunlight. He is said to have burned ships using concentrated beams. The story is debated, but the principle is sound. These are not myths. They are demonstrations. You were taught that ancient technology is crude, but some techniques remain unmatched. What kind of skill leaves no manual? In modern labs, researchers study piezoelectricity. It is the generation of electric charge through pressure. It occurs in crystals, bones, and certain ceramics. Ancient builders used quartz-rich stone. They placed it in temples, tombs, and altars. They aligned it with magnetic fields. They shaped it to resonate. Some believe they understood piezoelectric effects. Others believe they felt them. You were taught that energy is invisible, but ancient people may have felt its presence. What kind of knowledge is sensed, not seen? In the Andes, the Chavan culture built temples with underground canals. Water flowed beneath chambers. It created sound. It created vibration in India. Stepwells were built with geometric precision. They managed water. They cooled air. They created encoded in Egypt. Obelisks were placed at intersections of ley lines. They were carved from granite. They were charged by sunlight. These are not decorations. They are systems. You were taught that ancient structures are symbolic, but some behave like circuits. What kind of architecture conducts energy? In modern times, we build with wires. We measure with meters. We explain with formulas. But ancient civilizations built with stone. They measured with stars. They explained with stories. Their energy systems were not industrial. They were environmental. They were spiritual. They were functional. You were taught that progress is linear, but history suggests otherwise. What kind of advancement leaves no blueprint? You are standing in a temple. The air is still. The walls hum. The floor vibrates. There are no switches, no wires, no lights, but something moves. Something flows. You were taught that energy is modern, but it may be ancient. What else have you been taught to forget? Medicine beyond its time you are holding. A scroll. Its surface is worn. Its ink faded. But the words describe wounds, fevers, and remedies. They list herbs, minerals, and surgical tools. They speak of healing not as magic, but as method. This is the Edwin Smith Papyrus. It dates to ancient Egypt, around 1600 BCE. It is the oldest known surgical text. It describes diagnosis, treatment, and prognosis. It separates the curable from the incurable. It is clinical. It is rational. You were taught that ancient medicine was superstition, but this scroll reads like a textbook. What kind of civilization writes instructions for brain surgery? In Peru, archaeologists have found skulls with circular holes. The bone around the holes shows signs of regrowth. This means the patient survived. This means the procedure worked. The technique is called trepanation. It involves removing part of the skull to relieve pressure or treat trauma. It was performed with stone tools. It was practiced for centuries. You were taught that surgery requires steel, but these incisions were made with obsidian. Obsidian is sharper than modern scalpels. It cuts cleanly. It heals quickly. What kind of knowledge is passed through stone? In India, the Sushruta Samhita is a Sanskrit text on medicine. It dates to around 600 BCE. It describes over 300 surgical procedures. It lists more than 120 instruments. It includes techniques for cataract removal, skin grafts, and cesarean sections. The text emphasizes hygiene. It recommends boiling tools. It advises washing wounds. It outlines post-operative care. You were taught that sterilization began in the 19th century, but this text predates it by over 2 millennia. What kind of healer works without anesthesia? In China, the Huangdi Najing is a foundational medical text. It describes the body as a system of energy. It maps meridians. It explains pulse diagnosis. It links emotions to organs. Asterisk, the text is philosophical, but it is also empirical. It records symptoms. It recommends treatments. It emphasizes balance. You were taught that energy medicine is unscientific, but this system has endured for thousands of years. What kind of model survives without machines? In Greece, Hippocrates wrote about disease as a natural phenomenon. He rejected divine punishment. He emphasized observation. He categorized illnesses. He recommended diet, rest, and environment as treatment. He introduced the concept of prognosis. He believed in patient confidentiality. He taught that medicine should do no harm. You were taught that ethics in medicine are modern, but they were practiced in ancient clinics. What kind of oath lasts longer than empires? In Mesopotamia, clay tablets record medical prescriptions. They list ingredients, dosages, and preparation methods. They describe symptoms and outcomes. They include instructions for midwives, healers, and herbalists. The tablets are methodical. They are formulaic. They resemble pharmacy records. You were taught that writing began with trade, but some of the earliest texts are about healing. What kind of society documents its remedies before its laws? In Africa, Traditional medicine includes thousands of plant-based treatments. The San people use hudia for appetite suppression. The Yoruba use bitter kola for respiratory issues. The Zulu use aloe for burns and wounds. These remedies are passed orally. They are tested through generations. They are adapted to climate, soil, and season. You were taught that oral tradition is unreliable, but some of these treatments are now patented. What kind of wisdom is carried in memory? In the Americas, indigenous healers used willow bark for pain. Willow contains salicin, a precursor to aspirin. They used tobacco for ritual and medicine. They used chili peppers for circulation. They used coca leaves for altitude sickness. These were not guesses. They were observations. They were experiments. You were taught that medicine requires laboratories, but these remedies were discovered in forests. What kind of research is done without writing? In medieval Islamic medicine, scholars translated Greek, Persian, and Indian texts. They built hospitals. They trained physicians. They catalogued diseases. Avicenna's Canon of Medicine became a standard text in Europe. It described contagious disease. It emphasized quarantine. It outlined pharmacology. You were taught that science in the Middle Ages was stagnant, but these scholars preserved and expanded medical knowledge. What kind of legacy crosses languages? In Europe, monasteries preserved medical texts. Monks copied manuscripts. They cultivated medicinal gardens. They treated the sick. Their remedies included garlic, honey, and vinegar. They used leeches and cupping. They practiced bloodletting. Some treatments were misguided. Others were effective. You were taught that religion and science were opposed, but healing was a sacred duty. What kind of care is given in silence? In Japan, Campo medicine blends Chinese theory with local practice. It uses herbal formulas. It emphasizes diagnosis through observation. It treats the body as a whole. In Korea, traditional medicine includes acupuncture, moxibustion, and herbal therapy. It is integrated with modern healthcare. It is regulated and researched. In Vietnam, traditional medicine is used alongside Western medicine. It includes massage, diet, and meditation. You were taught that tradition is outdated, but these systems adapt. What kind of practice survives modernization? In modern times, researchers study ancient remedies. They isolate compounds. They test efficacy. They rediscover forgotten cures. Turmeric is studied for inflammation. Neem for antibacterial properties. Ashwagandha for stress. These plants were used for centuries. Now they are validated. You were taught that progress moves forward, but sometimes it circles back. What kind of cure is rediscovered? You are reading a prescription. It is written in ink. It is typed on a screen. It is spoken aloud, but its roots are older. Its ingredients are ancient. Its logic is inherited. Medicine is not just science. It is memory. It is trial. It is care. You were taught that healing is technical, but it is also human. What kind of knowledge heals across time? Maps that shouldn't exist. You are looking at a map. Its edges are frayed. Its ink is faded, but its details are precise. It shows coastlines. It shows mountains. It shows Antarctica without ice. This is the Piri race map. It was drawn in 1513 by an Ottoman admiral. It includes parts of South America, Africa, and Antarctica. It is based on older sources. Some of those sources no longer exist. Antarctica was not officially discovered until 1820. Its coastline was not mapped until the 20th century, but this map shows it accurately and ice-free. You were taught that ancient maps were symbolic, but this one is geographic. What kind of knowledge survives without explanation? In China, the Daming Hanyi II was created in 1389. It is a world map. It shows Africa, Europe, and the Middle East. It includes rivers, mountains, and cities. It is centered on China, but it reaches far beyond. The map was drawn during the Ming Dynasty. It predates European exploration. It suggests contact, trade, and observation. You were taught that global awareness began with Columbus, but this map suggests otherwise. What kind of worldview includes distant lands? In Korea, the Gangnam-do map was created in 1402. It shows the known world. It includes India, Persia, and parts of Africa. It is detailed. It is proportional. The map was based on Chinese and Islamic sources. It reflects a synthesis of knowledge. It was made before the age of exploration. You were taught that cartography is Western, but this map is Eastern. What kind of collaboration crosses continents? In India, ancient texts describe the Earth as round. They mention axial tilt. They describe planetary motion. They include measurements of distance and time. The Surya Siddhanta, written over 1,500 years ago, calculates the Earth's diameter. Its value is close to modern measurements. It describes eclipses. It predicts solstices. You were taught that astronomy began with telescopes, but these calculations were made with observation. What kind of precision comes from the naked eye? In Babylon, clay tablets record star positions. They include lunar cycles. They predict eclipses. They track planetary motion. The Mul-Apin tablets date to 1000 BCE. They are systematic. They are mathematical. They do not resemble myths. They resemble data. You were taught that ancient records are poetic, but these are empirical. What kind of science is written in cuneiform in Egypt? The Turin Papyrus is a map of gold mines. It shows roads, quarries, and geological features. It is topographic. It is functional. It was created over 3,000 years ago. It was used for resource management. It includes annotations. You were taught that ancient maps are decorative, but this one is practical. What kind of economy requires cartography? In Polynesia, navigators used stick charts. They were made of wood, shells, and fiber. They represented wave patterns, currents, and islands. They were not visual maps. They were tactile navigators. Memorized them. They used stars, swells, and birds to guide their journeys. They traveled thousands of miles across open ocean. You were taught that navigation requires instruments, but these voyages were made with intuition. What kind of memory crosses oceans? In the Americas, the Aztecs created codices. They included maps of cities, roads, and boundaries. They used symbols, colors, and orientation. They recorded tribute, trade, and migration. The Codex Mendoza shows the layout of Tenochtitlan. It includes canals, temples, and markets. It is spatial. It is administrative. You were taught that indigenous maps are abstract, but this one is urban. Planning. What kind of city is drawn from above? In medieval Europe, the Hereford Mappa Mundi was created around 1300. It shows biblical scenes, mythical creatures, and geographic features. It includes Jerusalem at the center. It reflects belief and geography. It is not accurate by modern standards, but it reveals how people saw the world. It combines faith, history, and space. You were taught that maps are objective, but this one is interpretive. What kind of truth is shaped by worldview? In Islamic civilization, Al-Idrisi created the tabula Rogeriana in 1154. It is a detailed map of the known world. It includes Europe, Asia, and Africa. It is based on travel accounts and earlier sources. Al-Idrisi worked in Sicily. He collaborated with scholars from different cultures. His map was used for centuries. You were taught that science is isolated, but this map is collaborative. What kind of knowledge is built across borders? In South America, the Inca used quipus. They are knotted strings. They record numbers, categories, and relationships. They are not maps in the visual sense, but they encode spatial data. Quipus were used for census, inventory, and logistics. They tracked movement, storage, and location. You were taught that writing requires ink, but these records are woven. What kind of system maps without drawing? In medieval monasteries, maps were copied by hand. They preserved ancient knowledge. They included Roman roads, trade routes, and landmarks. They were updated with local data. These maps were not static. They evolved. They reflected continuity. Asterisk, you were taught that progress is linear, but these maps are recursive. What kind of tradition redraws the world? In modern times, satellite imagery reveals ancient paths. Old maps align with new data. Desert roads match trade routes. Forest clearings match settlements. Technology confirms what was once dismissed. It validates oral history. It reinterprets myth. You were taught that ancient maps are unreliable, but they are being proven. What kind of accuracy survives skepticism? You are holding a map. It is old. It is incomplete, but it is intentional. It shows what mattered. It shows what was known. It shows what was remembered. Maps are not just tools. They are stories. They are choices. They are reflections. You were taught that maps show reality, but they also shape it. What kind of world is drawn by memory? Astronomy and cosmic knowledge. You are standing beneath a sky filled with stars. They are silent. They are distant. But they are not random. Thousands of years ago, people looked up and saw patterns. They saw movement. They saw rhythm. They saw meaning. This is where astronomy began. Not with telescopes, not with equations, but with observation. You were taught that ancient people feared the sky, but they measured it. What kind of knowledge begins with silence? In Mesopotamia, clay tablets record the positions of stars. They track lunar cycles. They predict eclipses. They list constellations. The Mal-Apin tablets date to 1000 BCE. They are systematic. They are mathematical. They are empirical. They do not describe gods. They describe motion. You were taught that ancient records are myth, but these are data. What kind of science is written in cuneiform? In Egypt, temples align with celestial events. The Great Pyramid is oriented to true north. Its shafts point to specific stars. Its dimensions encode mathematical constants. The Temple of Karnak aligns with the winter solstice. The Temple of Abu Simbel lights up on Ramses II's birthday. The architecture is astronomical. You were taught that temples are symbolic, but these are instruments. What kind of structure measures time? In China, astronomers recorded solar and lunar eclipses. They tracked comets. They mapped star positions. They created calendars based on celestial cycles. The Book of Silk, dating to 400 BCE, includes comet illustrations. The Han Dynasty built observatories. They used armillary spheres to model the heavens. You were taught that astronomy is Western, but this system is ancient. What kind of sky is drawn in bronze? In India, the Surya Siddhanta describes planetary motion. It calculates the Earth's diameter. It predicts eclipses and solstices. It includes trigonometric functions. The text is over 1,500 years old. Its values are close to modern measurements. Its methods are observational. You were taught that precision requires instruments. But this was done with shadows. What kind of math is cast by the sun? In the Americas, the Mayans built observatories. El Caracol in Chichen Itza tracks Venus. Temples align with equinoxes and solstices. Calendars record lunar cycles and solar years. The Dresden Codex includes eclipse tables. It predicts celestial events with accuracy. It is mathematical. It is astronomical. You were taught that calendars are cultural, but this one is cosmic. What kind of time is measured in stone? In Greece, Hipparchus discovered precession. He noticed that the position of stars shifted over centuries. He catalogued over 800 stars. He developed trigonometry. Ptolemy wrote the Almagest. It became a standard text for centuries. It described planetary motion. It modeled the geocentric universe. You were taught that ancient models were flawed, but they were functional. What kind of system lasts through error? In Islamic civilization, observatories were built in Baghdad, Samarkand, and Istanbul. Al-Battani refined planetary measurements. Al-Tozi developed models of motion. Ela Beg catalogued over 1,000 stars. They translated Greek texts. They corrected errors. They expanded knowledge. You were taught that science paused in the Middle Ages, but it continued quietly. What kind of progress is made in translation? In Polynesia, navigators used stars to cross oceans. They memorized constellations. They tracked seasonal changes. They followed celestial paths. They did not use maps. They used memory. They used rhythm. You were taught that navigation requires instruments. But these voyages were guided by light. In medieval Europe, cathedrals align with solstices. Stained glass windows mark equinoxes. Towers cast shadows that measure time. These alignments are not decorative. They are intentional. They are astronomical. You were taught that architecture is symbolic. But some buildings are calendars. What kind of faith is timed by stars? In Africa, the Dogon people describe Sirius B. It is a companion star to Sirius A. It is invisible to the naked eye. It was confirmed by telescopes in the 20th century. The Dogon knew its orbit. They knew its density. They described it centuries before its discovery. You were taught that oral tradition is unreliable, but this one is precise. What kind of memory sees the unseen? In modern times, ancient observatories are rediscovered. Stone circles align with solstices. Petroglyphs mark lunar cycles. Ruins encode celestial knowledge. Technology confirms what was once dismissed. It validates observation. It reinterprets myth. You were taught that ancient astronomy is symbolic, but it is being proven. What kind of truth returns with light? You are looking at the sky. It is vast. It is quiet. but it is not empty. It holds patterns. It holds rhythm. It holds memory. Ancient people did not fear the sky. They studied it. They measured it. They lived by it. You were taught that progress moves forward, but some knowledge looks up. What else have you been taught to forget? Philosophy that predicted modern science. You are reading a sentence written 2,000 years ago. It describes atoms. It describes void. It describes motion. This is not a physics textbook. It is a philosophical treatise. It was written by Democritus. He believed that everything was made of indivisible particles. He called them atomos. He believed they moved through empty space. He believed they formed all matter. You were taught that atomic theory began in the 19th century, but this idea is ancient. What kind of mind imagines the invisible? In India, the Vaisheshika school proposed a theory of matter. It described atoms as eternal, indivisible, and active. It categorized substances, qualities, and motion. It linked perception to reality. It emphasized logic. The philosopher Kannada wrote that atoms combine to form dyads and triads. He described heat, light, and magnetism. He believed in cause and effect. He believed in inference. You were taught that science requires experiments. But this system is conceptual. What kind of theory is built from thought? In China, Taoist philosophy described the universe as a balance of forces, yin and yang, passive and active, dark and light. It emphasized cycles. It emphasized flow. It emphasized transformation. The Tao is not a god. It is a principle. It is a path. Taoist texts describe the body as a microcosm. They describe nature as a system. They describe change as constant. You were taught that philosophy is abstract, but this one is systemic. What kind of wisdom sees patterns in everything? In Greece, Heraclitus wrote that everything flows. He believed in constant change. He believed in fire as the fundamental element. He believed in logos, rational principle that governs the cosmos. He wrote that opposites create harmony, that struggle creates balance, that unity hides in diversity. We're taught that science seeks stability, but this philosophy embraces flux. What kind of truth moves without rest? In Egypt, priests studied geometry, astronomy, and medicine. They believed in mat, order, balance, and justice. They applied these principles to architecture, agriculture, and governance. Mat was not just moral, it was mathematical. It was cosmic. Temples were built with symmetry. Calendars were aligned with stars. Rituals followed seasonal cycles. You were taught that religion and science are separate, but this system blends them. What kind of order shapes both ethics and engineering? In Persia, Zoroastrianism described a dualistic universe, light and darkness, truth and falsehood, creation and decay. It emphasized free will. It emphasized responsibility. It emphasized cosmic law. The concept of Usha truth and order governed natural and moral realms. It influenced Greek, Jewish, and Islamic thought. It shaped ethics and cosmology. But this philosophy is moral. What kind of universe demands choice? In Islamic philosophy, scholars integrated reason and revelation. Al-Farabi wrote about logic, ethics, and metaphysics. Avicenna described the soul, the intellect, and the nature of existence. Averroes defended rational inquiry. They translated Greek texts. They expanded them. They applied them to medicine, astronomy, and law. They believed that truth could be discovered through reason. They believed that the universe was intelligible. They believed that knowledge was a form of worship. We're taught that faith opposes science. But this tradition sees them as allies. Asterisk, what kind of inquiry begins with reverence? In medieval Europe, scholasticism sought to reconcile faith and reason. Thomas Aquinas wrote about natural law. He believed that the world was governed by principles. He believed that observation could reveal divine order. He used Aristotle's logic. He applied it to theology. He built a system of thought. You were taught that philosophy is speculative, but this one is structured. What kind of belief is built on deduction? In Africa, oral traditions preserved cosmological ideas. The Yoruba described Orin and I, heaven and earth. They believed in cycles of birth, death, and rebirth. They described energy, destiny, and alignment. The Dogon described the creation of the universe. They spoke of spirals, seeds, and vibration. They described Sirius, beyond, invisible star. These ideas were not written. They were remembered. They were recited. You were taught that science requires documentation, but this knowledge lives in rhythm. What kind of truth is sung? In the Americas, indigenous philosophies described the earth as alive. The Hopi spoke of time as circular. The Inca believed in duality, Hanon and Huron, upper and lower. The Aztecs described 5 suns, 5 ages of the world. They built calendars. They tracked stars. They honored cycles. Their rituals mirrored seasons. Their stories encoded astronomy. Their ethics reflected ecology. You were taught that myth is fiction, but these systems are observational. What kind of science is told as story? In Renaissance Europe, humanism revived classical thought. It emphasized reason, experience, and individual inquiry. It challenged authority. It encouraged exploration. Philosophers like Descartes, Bacon, and Galileo questioned tradition. They proposed methods. They sought certainty. Descartes wrote, "Think, therefore I am." He believed in doubt as a tool. He believed in clarity. You were taught that science is empirical, but it begins with questions. What kind of certainty starts with skepticism? In the Enlightenment, thinkers proposed universal laws. Newton described gravity. Leibniz described calculus. Kant described categories of thought. They believed in reason. They believed in progress. They believed in systems. They built on ancient ideas. They refined them. They formalized them. You were taught that philosophy ends where science begins, but they overlap. What kind of knowledge connects logic and experiment? You are reading a sentence. It is old. It is quiet, but it is precise. It describes motion. It describes balance. It describes cause. Philosophy is not decoration. It is foundation. It is structure. You were taught that science is modern, but its roots are ancient. What else have you been taught to forget? Suppressed knowledge and historical cover-up suit are reading a history book. It is thick, it is detailed, but it is incomplete. Entire civilizations are missing. Entire discoveries are ignored. Entire stories are rewritten. This is not an accident. This is a pattern. You were taught that history is objective, but it is curated. What kind of truth is left out? In Alexandria, the great library once held hundreds of thousands of scrolls. It was a center of learning. It collected texts from Greece, Egypt, India, and Persia. It preserved science, philosophy, and literature. Then it burned. not once, but several times, by accident, by war, by decree. The details are unclear. The consequences are not. You were taught that knowledge is cumulative, but this fire erased centuries. What kind of wisdom disappears in smoke? In Spain, during the conquest of the Americas, thousands of indigenous codices were destroyed. They were burned by missionaries. They were labeled heretical. They were replaced with scripture. The Codex Mendoza survived. The Dresden Codex survived. Most did not. Contained astronomy, medicine, and history. They recorded migrations, rituals, and laws. You were taught that conquest brings civilization, but it also brings silence. What kind of memory is erased by fire? In India, colonial scholars dismissed ancient texts. They labeled them myth. They ignored their mathematics. They mistranslated their astronomy. The Surya Siddhanta was reduced to folklore. The Vedas were stripped of scientific meaning. The Ayurvedic system was marginalized. British administrators rewrote curricula. They replaced Sanskrit with English. They replaced indigenous knowledge with European models. You were taught that education is neutral, but it can be strategic. What kind of curriculum reshapes identity? In Africa, colonial powers suppressed oral traditions. They dismissed griots and elders. They ignored genealogies and cosmologies. They replaced storytelling with textbooks. Entire kingdoms were reduced to footnotes. Entire migrations were omitted. Entire technologies were forgotten. Iron smelting in Nigeria, architecture in Mali, navigation in Madagascar. You were taught that history is written, but some of it is spoken. What kind of truth survives without paper? In the Middle East, archaeological sites were looted. Artifacts were taken to museums. Contexts were lost. Interpretations were imposed. Cuneiform tablets were translated selectively. Religious texts were prioritized. Economic records were ignored. Epic of Gilgamesh was preserved, but trade routes, farming techniques, and legal codes were sidelined. You were taught that archaeology reveals the past, but it also edits it. What kind of story is shaped by selection? In Europe, during the Inquisition, scientific texts were banned. Books on astronomy, anatomy, and chemistry were censored. Galileo was silenced. Bruno was executed. The Helios model was forbidden. Medical research was restricted. Alchemy was criminalized. You were taught that science thrives in freedom, but it also survives in secrecy. What kind of discovery hides in fear? In the Soviet Union, genetics was suppressed. Lysenkoism replaced Mendelian theory. Political ideology shaped biology. Dissenting scientists were imprisoned. Crop failures followed. Scientific progress stalled. Truth was subordinated to doctrine. You were taught that science is apolitical, but it can be weaponized. What kind of experiment serves power? In the United States, indigenous knowledge was excluded from academia. Native languages were banned in schools. Traditional medicine was dismissed. Ecological practices were ignored. Fire management, crop rotation, seasonal migration, these were labeled primitive. They were replaced with industrial models. They were rediscovered centuries later. You were taught that innovation is modern, but some solutions are ancient. What kind of wisdom returns after rejection? In Australia, Aboriginal astronomy was overlooked. Songlines mapped the stars. Ceremonies marked solstices. Rock art recorded celestial events. These were dismissed as myth. They were not studied. They were not taught. Now, researchers find alignments. They find accuracy. They find systems. You were taught that science requires instruments, but some knowledge is sung. What kind of sky is remembered in rhythm? In Cambodia, Angkor Wat was called a lost city. Its builders were forgotten. Its hydraulic systems were ignored. Its astronomical alignments were dismissed. Colonial explorers described it as mysterious. They speculated about foreign origins. They denied local genius. Now satellite imaging reveals complexity. Now inscriptions are translated. Now the Khmer legacy is restored. You were taught that ruins are remnants, but they are also records. What kind of city survives misinterpretation? In Bolivia, the ruins of Tiahuanaco were misdated. They were labeled primitive. Their precision was ignored. Their scale was underestimated. Stone blocks with drill-like holes, interlocking joints, astronomical alignments. These features were unexplained. They were dismissed. They were forgotten. You were taught that complexity requires machines. But some structures defy tools. What kind of architecture resists explanation? In Peru, the Nazca lines were called art. They were described as ritual. They were not studied as maps. Now, researchers find alignments. They find water sources. They find magnetic anomalies. The lines are not random. They are functional. They are intentional. You were taught that symbols are decorative, but some are directional. What kind of design is drawn across deserts? In the archives of colonial powers, documents remain sealed. Letters, treaties, and reports. They describe suppression. They describe extraction. They describe manipulation. Land surveys, resource maps, cultural assessments. These were used to control. They were used to divide. They were used to erase. You were taught that records are objective, but some are strategic. What kind of paper? Read borders in museums. Artifacts are displayed without context. Masks, tools, and scrolls. They are labeled. They are lit, but they are disconnected. Their stories are fragmented. Their meanings are diluted. Their origins are obscured. You were taught that preservation is protection, but it can also be isolation. What kind of heritage lives behind glass? In textbooks, timelines are simplified. Events are compressed. Figures are prioritized. Narratives are streamlined. Entire centuries are skipped. Entire cultures are summarized. Entire contributions are minimized. You were taught that history is linear, but it is layered. What kind of chronology flattens complexity? In universities, research is filtered. Funding shapes focus. Politics shape access. Trends shape relevance. Some topics are encouraged. Others are discouraged. Some voices are amplified. Others are silenced. You were taught that academia is impartial, but it is influenced. What kind of inquiry avoids discomfort? In media, history is dramatized. It is simplified. It is commercialized. Heroes are elevated. Villains are exaggerated. Nuance is lost. You were taught that storytelling reveals truth, but it can also distort. What kind of narrative sells better than fact? In public memory, monuments shape perception. Statues, plaques, and museums. They commemorate. They celebrate. They omit. Some figures are honored. Others are ignored. Some events are remembered. Others are erased. You were taught that monuments are history, but they are also choices. What kind of stone speaks louder than silence? In digital spaces, algorithms shape exposure. Search results vary. Visibility shifts. Access depends. Some sources are promoted, others are buried. Some facts are repeated, others are lost. You were taught that the internet is open, but it is curated. What kind of truth is filtered by code? You are reading a history book. It is thick, it is detailed, but it is incomplete. Asterisk, entire civilizations are missing. Entire discoveries are ignored. Entire stories are rewritten. This is not an accident. This is a pattern. You were taught that history is objective, but it is curated. What kind of truth is left out? Daily life in advanced ancient worlds. You wake up in a stone house. The walls are cool. The air is quiet. Outside, the sun rises over terraced fields. You are in the Inca Empire. It is the 15th century. Your home is built from granite blocks. They fit together without mortar. They resist earthquakes. They hold warmth. You eat maize and potatoes. You drink chicha, a fermented corn beverage. You wear woven garments, dyed with natural pigments. You walk to the fields. You follow the calendar. You follow the stars. You were taught that ancient life was harsh, but it was also rhythmic. What kind of civilization wakes with the sun? You live in Mohenjo-Daro. It is 2500 BCE. Your city is quiet, orderly, and clean. The streets follow a grid. The bricks are standardized. The drains are covered. You bathe in a public pool. You fetch water from a private well. You cook with clay ovens. You store grain in communal granaries. There are no palaces, no monuments, no armies. You were taught that cities require hierarchy, but this one values balance. What kind of society builds without kings? You are a citizen of Rome. It is the 1st century CE. You live in an apartment block called an insula. You walk on paved roads. You drink from aqueduct-fed fountains. You visit the baths. You eat bread, olives, and cheese. You attend public lectures. You read scrolls in libraries. You use calendars. You follow laws. You debate philosophy. You were taught that ancient life was isolated, but this one is connected. You live in ancient China. It is the Han Dynasty. Your home is made of wood and clay. Your village is surrounded by rice paddies. You rise early. You offer incense. You sweep the courtyard. You study Confucian texts. You learn calligraphy. You observe the stars. You eat steamed buns and vegetables. You drink tea. You wear silk. You were taught that tradition resists change, but this one evolves. What kind of culture balances ritual and innovation? You are in ancient Egypt. It is the new kingdom. You live near the Nile. You farm with shadoofs and canals. You track the flood cycle. You measure land with rope. You worship. In temples, you record dreams. You write in hieroglyphs. You eat lentils, onions, and fish. You grind grain into flour. You bake in communal ovens. You were taught that ancient life was static, but this one adapts. What kind of rhythm follows the river? You live in the Maya civilization. It is the classic period. Your city is built with limestone. Your plaza hosts ceremonies. You study astronomy. You carve glyphs. You play ball games. You eat beans, squash, and cacao. You trade jade and obsidian. You honor ancestors. You were taught that ancient life was tribal, but this one is intellectual. What kind of world maps the stars in stone? You are in medieval Timbuktu. It is the 14th century. Your city is a center of learning. You study in madrasas. You copy manuscripts. You debate theology and law. You trade salt, gold, and manuscripts. You live in mud brick homes. You wear cotton robes. You eat millet and dates. You drink goat's milk. You gather in courtyards. You were taught that knowledge flows from the west, but this one flows from the desert. What kind of wisdom travels by caravan? You live in Heian, Japan. It is the 11th century. Your home is made of wood and paper. Your garden reflects the seasons. You write poetry. You wear layered silk robes. You attend moon viewing parties. You eat rice, pickled vegetables, and grilled fish. You drink sake. You read tales and diaries. You were taught that elegance is modern, but this one is ancient. What kind of life finds beauty in simplicity? You are in ancient Greece. It is the 5th century BCE. Your city is built on hills. Your agora is filled with voices. You discuss ethics. You vote in assemblies. You watch plays. You eat figs, olives, and lamb. You drink wine. You walk barefoot. You were taught that democracy is recent. But this one is foundational. What kind of freedom begins with dialogue? You live in the Khmer Empire. It is the 12th century. Your city is surrounded by reservoirs and canals. You farm rice. You build temples. You follow lunar calendars. You eat tropical fruits and fish. You wear cotton garments. You offer prayers. You were taught that empires are built on conquest, but this one is built on water. What kind of power flows with the monsoon? You are in the Andes. It is the Wari civilization. Your city is terraced into mountains. You store food in cold pits. You build roads across peaks. You trade textiles. You eat quinoa and llama meat. You drink herbal infusions. You chew coca leaves. You were taught that survival is struggle, but this one is strategic. What kind of planning spans altitudes? You live in ancient Mesopotamia. It is the Sumerian period. Your city is built with mud bricks. You write on clay tablets. You measure time with sundials. You irrigate fields. You eat barley and dates. You brew beer. You trade wool. You were taught that civilization began with war, but this one begins with writing. What kind of legacy is baked into clay? You are in the Indus Valley. It is Harappa. Your city is quiet. You walk on clean streets. You use standardized weights. You seal goods with carved stamps. You eat lentils and wheat. You wear cotton. You bathe daily. You were taught that ancient life was chaotic, but this one is organized. What kind of peace leaves no monuments? You live in ancient Anatolia. It is the Hittite Empire. Your city is fortified. You forge iron. You write in cuneiform. You negotiate treaties. You eat goat cheese and flatbread. You drink mead. You raise livestock. You were taught that diplomacy is modern, but this one is ancient. What kind of agreement is carved in stone? You are in ancient Persia. It is the Achaemenid Empire. Your roads stretch for miles. You send messages by courier. You trade across continents. You govern with tolerance. You eat pomegranates and lamb. You wear robes and jewelry. You speak multiple languages. You were taught that empires divide, but this one connects. What kind of rule respects diversity? You are in ancient Mali. It is the reign of Mansa Musa. Your city is golden. You build mosques. You study law. You give alms. You eat rice and yams. You wear embroidered cloth. You travel to Mecca. You were taught that wealth is modern, but this one is legendary. What kind of generosity shapes history? You are in ancient Vietnam. It is the Hong Sen culture. Your drums echo across valleys. You farm rice. You cast bronze. You sail rivers. You eat fish and bamboo shoots. You wear woven hats. You honor ancestors. You were taught that innovation is industrial, but this one is rhythmic. What kind of sound carries memory? You are in ancient Britain. It is the Iron Age. Your village is circular. You build with timber and thatch. You forge tools. You trade salt. You eat oats and berries. You wear wool. You gather around fire. You were taught that isolation means ignorance, but this one means resilience. What kind of life endures in simplicity? You are in ancient Thailand. It is the Banchang culture. Your pottery is painted. You farm rice. You raise cattle. You craft jewelry. You eat sticky rice and herbs. You wear beads. You celebrate festivals. You were taught that art is luxury, but this one is daily. What kind of beauty lives in clay? Civilizations that vanished without a trace you are walking through silence. There are no voices, no signs, no stories, but there are stones. There are walls. There are patterns. This was once a city. It had roads. It had homes. It had memory. Now it is quiet. You were taught that civilizations end with war, but some end with forgetting. What kind of world disappears without a sound? You are in Cahokia. It is 1,000 years ago. The city is vast. It has plazas, mounds, and wooden palisades. Tens of thousands live here. They farm maize. They trade across rivers. They build with precision. Then they vanish. No written record. No clear reason. Climate shifts. Social tension. Resource strain. You were taught that cities leave legacies, but this one leaves mystery. What kind of metropolis fades into soil? You are in Uber. It is the Arabian Peninsula. It is mentioned in ancient texts. It was a center of trade. Frankincense flowed through its markets. Caravans crossed its gates. Then it collapsed. The ground opened. The city sank. Satellite imagery revealed its roads. Ruins were found beneath sand. You were taught that legends are fiction, but this one is buried. What kind of city is swallowed by earth? You are in non-metal. It is built on coral reefs. It is made of basalt columns. It floats between land and sea. It was a ceremonial center. It had canals, tombs, and temples. It was isolated, yet advanced. Then it was abandoned. No invasion, no fire, just silence. You were taught that isolation means weakness, but this one built with stone and water. What kind of architecture dissolves into tide? You are in the Indus Valley. It is Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro. The cities are planned. The streets are clean. The systems are efficient. Then they vanish. No conquest, no collapse, just disappearance. Trade routes shifted. Rivers changed course. Languages faded. Taught that civilization leaves monuments, but this one leaves order. What kind of legacy is invisible? You are in the Olmec heartland. It is Mesoamerica. The people carve colossal heads. They build ceremonial centers. They shape culture. Then they vanish. Their cities are abandoned. Their influence remains. The Maya, Aztec, and Zapotec inherit their symbols. But the Olmec name fades. You were taught that origin stories are clear. But this one is layered. What kind of culture survives through others? You are in the ancestral Puebloan world. It is Chaco Canyon. It is Mesa Verde. It is a network of roads, dwellings, and observatories. Then it empties. Drought, migration, transformation. The people move. They become Hopi, Zuni, and others. The architecture remains. You were taught that disappearance means extinction, but this one means evolution. What kind of identity shifts without ending? You are in the Khmer Empire. It is Angkor. The city is vast. It has reservoirs, canals, and temples. Then it declines. The jungle grows. The city sleeps. Climate change, political shifts, external pressure. You were taught that ruins are remnants. But this one is a system. What kind of empire is reclaimed by trees? You are in the Mississippian world. It stretches across rivers and forests. It connects tribes and trade. Then it fragments. New centers rise. Old ones fade. The network dissolves. The memory remains. You were taught that unity is permanent. But this one is fluid. What kind of civilization flows like water? You are in the Aksumite Empire. It is Ethiopia. It trades with Rome, India, and Arabia. It builds stelae and palaces. Then it retreats. Islam spreads. Trade routes shift. The capital moves. The name fades. You were taught that empires expand, but this one contracts. What kind of power chooses silence? You are in the Hittite world. It is Anatolia. It has treaties, laws, and diplomacy. Then it collapses. The Bronze Age ends. Cities burn. See peoples arrive. Records stop. You were taught that history is continuous, but this one breaks. What kind of knowledge vanishes in fire? You are in the Minoan civilization. It is Crete. It has palaces, frescoes, and trade. Then it falls. Volcanoes erupt. Tsunamis strike. The Mycenaeans arrive. The language changes. You were taught that art survives. But this one is submerged. What kind of beauty drowns? You are in the Sogdian world. It is Central Asia. It connects East and West. It trades silk and ideas. Then it fades. Empires rise. Borders shift. The cities are buried. The language disappears. You were taught that trade builds permanence, but this one is transient. What kind of culture lives between empires? You are in the Nabatean kingdom. It is Petra. It is carved into rock. It controls desert trade. Then it declines. Rome absorbs it. Roots change. The city remains. The people do not. You were taught that stone is eternal, but memory is not. What kind of city echoes without voices? You are in the Lycurgan Sparta. It is discipline. It is order. It is silence. Then it fades. Athens rises. Rome dominates. Remain. The culture shifts. You were taught that strength endures, but this one dissolves. What kind of legacy is austere? You are in the Etruscan world. It is Italy before Rome. It has art, writing, and religion. Then it is absorbed. The language dies. The cities change. Rome inherits. Rome rewrites. You were taught that conquest is creation, but this one is erasure. What kind of origin is overwritten? You are in the Scythian steppe. It is mobility. It is horses. It is gold. Then it disperses. Tribes shift. Borders change. The artifacts remain. The names do not. You were taught that nomads leave nothing. but this one leaves treasure. What kind of wealth travels? You are in the Tartessos region. It is Iberia. It is myth and metal. Then it vanishes. No ruins, no texts, just speculation. You were taught that history is visible, but this one is elusive. What kind of civilization leaves only rumor? You are in the world of the sea peoples. They arrive, they disrupt, they disappear. No homeland, no origin, no conclusion. They end the Bronze Age. They begin mystery. You were taught that invaders are known, but this one is anonymous. What kind of force leaves? No name. What we're only now beginning to understand. You are holding a fragment. It is broken. It is old, but it is familiar. It resembles a gear. It resembles a dial. It resembles intention. This is the Antikythera mechanism. It was found in a shipwreck off the coast of Greece. It dates to over 2,000 years ago. It models planetary motion. It predicts eclipses. It tracks cycles. You were taught that computers are modern, but this one is ancient. What kind of mind builds with bronze? You are reading a Sanskrit manuscript. It describes planetary distances. It calculates time in yugas. It speaks of cycles, orbits, and alignments. The Surya Siddhanta includes trigonometry. It includes astronomical constants. It includes observational precision. Modern researchers compare its values. They find accuracy. They find insight. You were taught that science begins with telescopes, but this one begins with shadows. What kind of math is cast by the sun? You are walking through a jungle. Beneath the trees, there are walls. There are roads. There are cities. LIDAR scans reveal thousands of structures. They show networks. They show density. They show design. In Guatemala, the Maya world expands. In Cambodia, Angkor resurfaces. In Peru, new Inca roads appear. You were taught that ruins are isolated, but they are connected. What kind of civilization hides in canopy? You are studying a skull. It has a circular incision. The bone has REGROWN. This is evidence of surgery. It is evidence of survival. It is evidence of knowledge. In Peru, trepanation was practiced. In India, surgical texts were written. In Egypt, medical papyri were preserved. Modern medicine rediscovers techniques. It validates herbs. It confirms procedures. You were taught that healing is modern, but some cures are remembered. What kind of care survives in silence? You are decoding a script. It is carved. It is painted. It is patterned. The Indus script remains unread. The Rongorongo glyphs remain mysterious. The linear A tablets remain UNTRANSLATED. Helps analyze frequency. It helps compare symbols. It helps reconstruct. Meaning. You were taught that language is linear, but some systems are cyclical. What kind of message waits in repetition? You are analyzing stone. It is shaped. It is aligned. It is resonant. The Great Pyramid encodes pi and phi. Stone circles align with solstices. Temples resonate at specific frequencies. Researchers study vibration. They study magnetism. They study geometry. You were taught that architecture is static, but some structures respond. What kind of design listens? You are reviewing satellite data. It shows patterns. It shows roads. It shows memory. Ancient trade routes reappear. Buried cities emerge. Forgotten rivers are traced. Technology reveals what was hidden. It confirms oral history. It reinterprets myth. You were taught that discovery is new, but this one is old. What kind of truth returns with light? You are reading a treaty. It is carved in cuneiform. It outlines terms. It defines boundaries. The Hittites negotiated peace. The Sumerians recorded law. The Egyptians documented diplomacy. Modern politics echoes ancient structure. Modern law echoes ancient precedent. You were taught that governance is recent, but this one is foundational. What kind of order is carved in clay? You are studying metallurgy. Ancient iron pillars resist rust. Bronze mirrors reflect hidden images. Obsidian blades outperform steel. Asterisk materials are tested. Techniques are replicated. Properties are rediscovered. You were taught that innovation is linear, but some knowledge loops. What kind of mastery leaves no manual? You are listening to a song. It maps the stars. It marks the seasons. It encodes geography. Polynesian navigators use rhythm. Aboriginal astronomers use ceremony. African griots use lineage. Modern researchers validate alignments. They confirm accuracy. They recognize systems. You were taught that science is written, but some knowledge is sung. What kind of memory travels in melody? You are reading a myth. It describes floods. It describes fire. It describes cycles. The Epic of Gilgamesh speaks of survival. The Popol Vuh speaks of creation. The Rigveda speaks of motion. Modern geology confirms floods. Modern astronomy confirms cycles. Modern physics confirms vibration. You were taught that myth is fiction, but some stories are data. What kind of truth wears metaphor? You are watching. The stars, they move, they return, they shift. Ancient calendars track Venus. Temples align with Sirius. Structures mark solstices. Modern astronomy confirms patterns. It refines models. It respects observation. You were taught that precision requires instruments, but this one requires patience. What kind of sky is measured in stone? You are reviewing climate data. It matches tree rings. It matches ice cores. It matches history. Civilizations rose with rain. They fell with drought. They moved with temperature. Ancient records describe famine. They describe migration. They describe adaptation. You were taught that climate is modern concern, but it shaped ancient life. What kind of survival reads the wind? You are studying genetics. It traces migration. It confirms ancestry. It maps movement. Ancient DNA reveals connections. It links continents. It links cultures. You were taught that identity is fixed, but this one is fluid. What kind of heritage travels in blood? You are reading a diagram. It shows energy flow. It shows balance. It shows polarity. Chinese medicine maps qi. Indian texts describe prana. Greek philosophy describes pneuma. Modern science studies bioelectricity. It studies magnetism. It studies resonance. You were taught that energy is mechanical, but this one is vital. What kind of force animates life? You are walking through ruins. They are quiet. They are vast. They are deliberate. You see rhythm. You were taught that ancient life was primitive, but it was planned. What kind of intelligence builds for centuries? You are reading a scroll. It describes ethics. It describes logic. It describes inquiry. Philosophy shaped science. Observation shaped belief. Balance shaped design. You were taught that knowledge is fragmented, but this one is whole. What kind of wisdom connects everything? What if they were smarter than us? You are standing in a museum. The lights are dim. The air is still. Around you are fragments, stone tools, clay tablets, bronze gears. They are labeled, they are dated, they are explained, but they are not complete. You were taught that history is known, but much of it is guessed. What kind of knowledge lives between the lines? You are walking through ruins. The walls are worn, the paths are broken, but the layout remains. There is symmetry, there is alignment, there is intention. You were taught that ancient builders worked with instinct, but these designs are calculated. What kind of intelligence leaves no blueprint? You are reading a scroll. It speaks of stars. It speaks of breath. It speaks of balance. It is poetic. It is mathematical. It is philosophical. You were taught that wisdom is fragmented, but this one is unified. What kind of mind sees connection in everything? You are watching the sky. It moves slowly. It returns predictably. It shifts subtly. Ancient calendars tracked this motion. Temples aligned with it. Rituals honored it. You were taught that astronomy is modern, but this rhythm is ancient. What kind of time is measured in silence? You are listening to a story. It is old. It is rhythmic. It is layered. It describes creation. It describes destruction. It describes cycles. You were taught that myth is fiction, but this one encodes observation. What kind of truth wears metaphor? You are studying a diagram. It shows energy. It shows flow. It shows polarity. It resembles a circuit. It resembles a body. It resembles a philosophy. You were taught that science is mechanical, but this one is vital. What kind of force animates both machines and minds? You are holding a tool. It is sharp. It is simple. It is effective. It was made without steel. It was shaped without electricity. It was used with precision. You were taught that technology is complex, but this one is elegant. What kind of mastery leaves no waste? You are walking a path. It stretches across mountains. It connects cities. It follows stars. It was built without maps. It was maintained without machines. It was used for centuries. You were taught that infrastructure is industrial, but this one is ancestral. What kind of road remembers the sky? You are reading a law. It defines property. It defines marriage. It defines justice. It was written in clay. It was enforced by consensus. It was preserved by tradition. You were taught that governance is recent, but this one is ancient. What kind of order survives without rulers? You are studying a ruin. It is not grand. It is not famous, but it is functional. It channels water. It resists earthquakes. It endures time. You were taught that greatness is visible, but this one is quiet. What kind of genius hides in simplicity? You are decoding a symbol. It is repeated. It is mirrored. It is rhythmic. It appears in textiles. It appears in architecture. It appears in ritual. You were taught that art is decoration, but this one is instruction. What kind of message is woven? You are reviewing a map. It shows rivers. It shows stars. It shows memory. It was drawn without satellites. It was passed without paper. It was remembered without writing. You were taught that navigation requires tools, but this one requires rhythm. What kind of direction sings? You are reading a recipe. It uses herbs. It uses heat. It uses time. It heals wounds. It calms nerves. It restores balance. You were taught that medicine is chemical, but this one is botanical. What kind of cure grows in silence? You are watching a ritual. It marks seasons. It honors ancestors. It aligns with stars. It is not superstition. It is not performance. It is calibration. You were taught that tradition resists progress, but this one refines it. What kind of ceremony measures time? You are listening to a debate. It is respectful. It is structured. It is philosophical. It questions ethics. It explores logic. It seeks truth. You were taught that reason is modern, but this one is ancient. What kind of dialogue builds civilization? You are reading a letter. It speaks of trade. It speaks of diplomacy. It speaks of peace. It was written in cuneiform. It was sent across empires. It was honored. That politics is power, but this one is balance. What kind of agreement lasts longer than borders? You are studying a calendar. It tracks lunar cycles. It predicts eclipses. It aligns with agriculture. It is carved in stone. It is painted on bark. It is remembered in song. You were taught that time is mechanical, but this one is ecological. What kind of schedule follows the moon? You are walking through history. It is not linear. It is not simple. It is not complete. It is layered. It is rhythmic. It is alive. You were taught that progress moves forward, but some knowledge loops. What kind of wisdom returns? You are standing in silence. The ruins are still. The stars are quiet. The scrolls are closed. But the questions remain. If they were smarter than us, why did we forget them? And if we're only now beginning to understand, what else have we missed?